Hey, Mauler,
Yes, Kensington.
what are your thoughts on the same God debate?
Which debate?
Muslims worship the same God.
Yeah, the very thing that this idiot on the top is ignoring. And
I actually think the example was
worship
totally
and adore.
against your view.
Worship
It
and
actually helps.
adore, dude.
That's not even a sentence. What's your sentence? Make a claim. I'm waiting for a debate. The debate requires an argument.
Oh yeah, what a disaster that debate was. Both sides took L's.
Is it the same God?
Well, no. However, in this debate, EOs are trying to convince Roman Catholics
Stop smacking your food in a debate.
that there's a contradiction in their tradition. And Catholics kept doubling down.
Words.
Look at this. This guy's having a meltdown.
Yeah, they worship the same God as Muslims. Kind of crazy.
So, do they?
No, they don't. Well, in a sense, they do. But no, they don't.
You sound confused.
No, trust me. They don't worship the same God. In fact, I'll prove it with their own Catholic theology. Come on, cue the intro.
Welcome to the Truth Cartel.
Catholics worship the same God as Muslims debate comes up every so often. And it's because of the problematic statements in Vatican II.
What is Vatican II?
The Second Vatican Council was an ecumenical council held between 1962 to 65, so roughly 3 years. It brought together bishops from all over the world to discuss and to modernize the church's teachings and practices. The main goals of Vatican II were to update the church's approach to the modern world, promote unity among Christians, and improve interfaith relations.
So where's the controversy?
Well, it's in the following quote. Vatican II, Lumen Gentium. But the plan of salvation also includes those who acknowledge the Creator. In the first place amongst whom are the Muslims. These profess to hold the faith of Abraham. And together with us, they adore the one and merciful God, who on the last day will judge mankind. In this recent EO and Catholic debate, this quote sparked significant controversy yet again. Instead of the EOs engaging Catholic doctrine systematically and on its own terms,
Where's your argument?
Catholic critics like Jay Dyer preferred to play theological gotcha,
Worship and adore, dude. Stop.
quoting Vatican II and other popes in an attempt to show a contradiction, rather than critiquing the internal philosophical and metaphysical foundations of Catholic theology. Let's build the argument via the Catholic paradigm.
Where do we start?
First, let's explore the philosophical metaphysical framework. That's natural theology. Natural theology is the branch of philosophy that seeks to know truths about God through reason alone. More specifically, within natural theology is Thomas Aquinas' view of divine simplicity. And that's where we're going to focus. Now, Thomas did not come up with the idea of divine simplicity. He systematized it, clarified, and defended it more rigorously than anybody before him.
Is he important to Catholic theology?
Important? Let Vatican II tell you how important he is. Optatum totius. Special care must be given to the perfect teaching of St. Thomas, especially in metaphysics, so that the students may acquire a deeper grasp of the mystery of salvation and develop the capacity to carry out theological tasks with greater precision. Perfect teaching. If that doesn't convince you, let's take a look at what some popes have said about Thomas Aquinas' metaphysical framework. Pope Leo VIII said this, quote, "The capital thesis in philosophy of St. Thomas are not to be called into doubt, especially in metaphysics." Pope St. Pius X, "The teachings of Thomas Aquinas are so great that to depart from them, especially in metaphysics, is to risk falling in error. The reason is that the doctrine of Aquinas rests on the firmest foundations and has stood the test of time and criticism. Let teachers beware of deviating, even in the slightest degree, from the teachings of St. Thomas in metaphysics." Even Vatican I gives a summary of exposition of the doctrine of divine simplicity. Vatican I, quote, "God is absolutely simple and immutable."
So is the belief of divine simplicity a requirement to be a Catholic?
Oh, absolutely. Now, there are variations of divine simplicity, but all agree on the fundamentals. So let's hone in on the non-negotiables for Catholics. God is not comprised of essence and existence. God is his existence. God's attributes are not separate parts of God. God is pure act, no potentiality in God. But what we're going to focus on, God is absolutely simple, no parts. Here's where the issue lies in saying that Muslims worship the same God as Catholics. The problem is they cut the Christian God into parts.
But don't the Muslims get some of the God of Abraham descriptors correct?
Yes, but they deny and are hostile to essential Christian claims about the God of the Bible. For instance, they deny the Trinity and divine simplicity. Muslims treat Allah's will as detached from essence. Therefore, Allah is composite.
Oh, so then it isn't the God of the Bible.
True, but remember, we're here to prove the very specific claim that I made. Catholics and Muslims do not worship the same God. Now let's drill down. In Thomas Aquinas' vast library of writings, he claims numerous times, along with his contemporaries, that if you don't have the same God, you don't got the same referent. Meaning, you're talking about another God or lack thereof.
So then Muslims are worshipping another God.
Actually, Thomas Aquinas says not God at all. So because Muslims deny the divine essence, Trinity, simplicity, pure act, they've rejected the essence, and in Catholic metaphysics, essence equals the referent. In Thomistic metaphysics, you cannot isolate or select attributes without referring to an entirely different essence. Thomas Aquinas' own quotes establish the essence reference rule pretty clearly.
What are some of the quotes?
Here's a quote. De veritate. To believe in God, if the belief is false, is not to believe in God, but in something else. Here's another quote. He who thinks of God otherwise than he is does not worship God, but a figment of his own mind. Summa Theologia. Names applied to God properly signify his substance and not merely metaphorical. What this is saying is naming and referring to God rightly requires some true grasp of his nature. If a person denies that God is love or is logos or is essence itself, then the names they use, for example God, fail to connect to the true referent.
Well, that's pretty powerful.
This topic is very complicated, has many nuances. I understand some of the counter-arguments from Catholics about Vatican II quotes can divert into words like worship or God, but throughout history, popes have emphatically agreed with Thomas. I mean, check these quotes out. Pope Pius XI says, "Those who receive from the full and integral profession of the Catholic faith do not have the same God as Catholics." Pope St. Pius X, "The modernist places religious experience above doctrine. But a religion that is not true is no religion at all, and worship divorced from the truth is idolatry in disguise." Pope Benedict XIV, "A heretic, though he believe in a God, does not believe in the true God, but in a creature of his own fancy." Pope Pius IX, "Outside the church, the true doctrine concerning God is either totally corrupted or mutilated, and hence no true worship can be offered to him by such men."
Then why does Vatican II say that Muslims worship the same God as Catholics?
Well, Catholics make the in a sense argument ad nauseum, positioning it in ways like, well, like with you, Kensington. I can say you worship data or information because it's so important to you, right?
Indeed I do, in a sense.
That is the controversy, my boy, in a sense. All over YouTube and other platforms, Catholics cope hard, shifting the goalposts by using semantical arguments about words like worship and God. Catholics often avoid these seemingly contradictory statements by saying that Vatican II is a diplomatic document with evangelistic intent.
Well, is it a diplomatic document?
Yes, in a sense, but I'll get to that in a minute. Let's hone in on exactly where the confusion and controversy lies and where it can be cleared up. This comes down to language and perspective. So a Catholic can claim Muslims pray to the one God of Abraham and also say, but apart from the revealed truth, their referent is metaphysically incomplete. The first is a phenomenological claim, and the second is an ontological one.
Phenomenal what?
I know, crazy word. So for the sake of this convo, all that I mean is in a sense. So from now on, I'll say in a sense.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So the in a sense, that is a subjective experience or intention. Ontology speaks about what actually exists and whether the referent matches God's true nature. So the question is, can they coexist? Both the in a sense and the ontological claim? Well, yes, in a sense. This is where the conflict arises. The problem is when in a sense statements are left unqualified and treated as ontologically sufficient. Here's an example. Muslims worship the same God. In a sense, this could mean they are sincerely trying to worship the Creator. Ontologically, this is false because God's essence is denied. When the church says in a sense, but lets it be taken ontologically, it creates doctrinal confusion, semantic slippage, a breakdown in metaphysical precision. According to Thomistic metaphysics and Catholic tradition, only ontology can determine if worship is truly directed to God. Phenomenology, or in a sense, may describe the heart, but it cannot determine the referent. Again, these two statements can only coexist when said this way. Muslims intend to worship the one God, but since they deny his revealed essence, Trinity, and simplicity, they do not ontologically worship the same God as Catholics. This allows pastoral charity without surrendering dogmatic clarity. This is important. Coexistence is only coherent when the church clearly says Muslims mean well, but the referent is mistaken.
So why don't Catholics just say that?
Well, they do, just not in Vatican II, and therein lies the problem. Some Catholics will say there are different schools of thought on this whole matter. While there are various philosophical schools within Catholic thought, not all frameworks are equally equipped to define theological reference with precision. Aquinas' doctrine of divine simplicity and proper naming of God stands as the metaphysical gold standard in the Church's tradition. Therefore, Catholics must conclude that to deny God's essence is to change the referent. It cannot be casually dismissed or explained away by appealing to alternate philosophical models. The multiplicity of schools does not permit relativism in theology. When it comes to the identity of God, the referent must be preserved ontologically. If God's essence is misidentified, as in the case of Islamic theology rejecting the Trinity and divine simplicity, then by Aquinas' own logic and metaphysical tradition of the Church, the referent changes. Thus, the claim they worship the same God is not salvaged by softer philosophies. It's falsified by metaphysical truth. The danger of innocence theology is the modern tendency to explain away doctrinal tension using the phrase in a sense. It reflects a deeper shift away from metaphysical realism toward an in a sense categories of religious experience. By allowing in a sense language to masquerade as ontological truth, such phrasing blurs a line between sincere intention and theological accuracy. While it's pastorally charitable to recognize man's design to reach toward God, this should never come at the cost of clarity about who God actually is. In Catholic theology, especially under Thomistic principles, partial recognition of God's attributes does not preserve the referent. To say someone worships the same God in a sense is at best a linguistic illusion. At worst, it permits doctrinal erosion. If God's essence is denied, then according to Aquinas and the councils, the referent has changed. Worship without essence is not true worship. It is misdirected homage to a mental construct. Therefore, Catholics must reject in a sense theology when it seeks to equate doctrinally incompatible gods under the guise of pastoral generosity.
So what's the solution?
Well, in my opinion, to help clear up any confusion of this in a sense versus ontological language, Catholics need a minimal clarifying ontological statement about this section of Vatican II. Now, lucky for the Catholics, their system actually allows that. Catholic theology allows for ambiguous Vatican II statements to be corrected or clarified through magisterial development without rejecting the council itself. And in my opinion, such correction is urgently needed when the ambiguity threatens the consistency of Catholic metaphysics, especially regarding the referent of worship. So the corrective statement to fix the Lumen Gentium controversy would go something like this. While Lumen Gentium recognizes the sincere intention of Muslims to worship the Creator, this cannot be understood to imply that their conception of God is metaphysically identical to the triune God revealed in Christ. Worship is only directed to the true God when His essence is rightly understood and accepted in faith. Such a statement would not contradict Vatican II, but contextualize it in continuity with tradition. So on a final note, in these types of theological discussions, the question isn't whether I can massage all arguments and get someone to agree with me in a sense. The real question will always be, in what sense? Well, that's my 2 cents on the matter. But what do I know? I'm not a Catholic.
That's not true. We are all Catholics. In a sense.
Yo, bro!
Ha! The Truth Cartel. Trafficking truth to the world.